Well, hello everyone. Here, show you right here. I'll talk about for now hiring immediately, and also, we can also known as to where apply today. And what does that usually mean when we see something like that? And like anybody, will probably thinking too that a number of job applications that you fill out and it send in for a job, or even if it is maybe training or just to agree on something, or anything like it. It could be a number of reasons and the ups and downs or anything else that you think that you're thinking about. And so it sure seems that way that a lot of times it's like you're 102 that if you've done it quite a few times that you may 102 that feels like it's like a redo. And if we all know what a redo pretty much means, is to where that you're repeating the same process over and over again, over and over and over again. And so it sure seems that way. I can go ahead and add on here is toward that, repeating the same process over and over again. Repeating the same process over and over again. And so a lot of times we probably thinking too that, why do you think that you would have to repeat the same process over and over again? And does that pretty much mean, is that if we were to actually do the calculations here, that which process is using more time? And like everybody else might even say that, really, it was really designed to use more time and maybe to go over everything over and over and over again. But it sure seems that way that the way we think about that, though, is that when we talk about, speak about, redoing something and maybe working at, walking through something a lot of times, and thinking too that, redoing, redoing something. I'll just say, redoing something here. Redoing something means, you are in need to spend more time reviewing that data and spending more time reading, repeating the same process over and over again. And I can maybe put on here, like, maybe for quote or something like that, is to that, to confirm that the process matches. Yeah, the process matches. So it's like it's another way of how you want to call it, like maybe like a 50-50 or something like that. But whenever the processes match, so let's just say that if we're talking about thousands of applications like per week, let's just say that per week that there's about maybe I don't know how many applications, but I would say that go ahead and say apply right here. Yeah, there's about maybe at least five. 5,000, I would say, per week, something like that. So if I were to put that into a math equation right there, and I want to know too that, out of the whole 5 days, just say 5 days, something like that. I'm like, we all know it seems like it's been much longer than that. And it sure seems that way that, copy and paste or anything like that, you want to say. But let's just say on average, though, that if you want to go ahead and put that into like a kind of like a math equation right there. To me, though, that looks like to me just a little bit. That right there looks like it was written backwards, but everybody else might even say that, if you've seen it about similar, and maybe let's just say that a number of times that you tried, it seems like that you're getting the same results. But let's just say if you are getting different results, is that supposed to be a good thing or if that's supposed to be a bad thing? So let's just say if you do redo an application, and let's just say that if you're getting different results, does that mean that the process is working, or does that pretty much mean that, really, that if you tried that already, let's just say that if you were sent a link, to go directly to an application. So it sure seems that way that we might think that, well, really, what is the main purpose about applications? Especially the ones that you had to redo. So whenever you had to redo an application, and you can maybe write on, like on a sticky note, saying that whenever you do redo an application, are you basically using the copy and paste tool, copying everything and pasting everything, doing everything all over again, and which that a lot of times that really gets on everybody's nerves, and I know like everybody, and I know exactly how everybody feels about that. Is that whenever you fill out an application, that you might even think that whenever you fill out an application, you just maybe automatically assume that you failed the exam, or maybe something like is that yeah, something went wrong the last time. But if we were actually do this study, I don't know if the study about maybe data science or something like that, but if we're talking about maybe 500,000 applications going in within at a time within 5 days, and to me though, that's just like entering into a drawing, like anybody say that whenever you do enter into a drawing, if your name is picked, from that big pile of names to be drawn for a prize, right? And to me, though, I look at that more just like the similar thing is that whenever you enter in for the drawing, though, and I can put on here, enter in for the drawing. Whenever you enter in for the drawing, you pretty much, I'm like, you're waiting. You're waiting for your name to be called. Your name or your number to be called. Your name and number to be called. So in a lot of ways, it's like how many of us will maybe think that maybe agree to where, is an application process pretty much the same thing? I would say so, Micah, but still that people might say that, really, whenever you enter into the drawing, you really only need to do that once, but then maybe wait 5 days before, we announce the winners, or anything like that. But let's just say on average, though, that if you're going to be applying for a job, and another thing that I want to talk about right here, talk about for scams, and also about, now hiring and canceled agendas can always be considered to be postponed or canceled only if the correct progress is made, or to recap on the decisions made. So these are the things that I want to discuss right here. What does dropped basically mean? Is to where it decided not to proceed. So this is something I'm sure that we've heard of before, and then talk about scams. Scams are considered yes, cyber. You call them cyber criminals, or you could also from from scammer artists. So it sure seems that way. That another thing that I could also put on here for scams is that how about I was gonna maybe say I'm like, the similar thing is whenever you do the work yourself, it's basically you're setting your own rules and your guidelines, right? But you're still it's all about I can also put on here counterfeit. It's the counterfeit type of work. So I can just, if anything, just use that. And anybody that may want to know too, if you have a teacher or somebody that's going to be looking over your work, and 102 is to where that if you use maybe more than 2 or 3 sentences right there, or what the definition is right there for each one of these words, and the teacher's going to say that, oh, okay, well, we're going to take off 3 points because you were only supposed to use one character and one optagon or something like that. And so it sure seems that way that whenever you're taking a test, a lot of times that the teachers, a lot of times, teachers or instructors or whoever, that they're going to be looking over your work, and then they're going to maybe say that if you write in too much detail into your answers, and maybe not everybody's really going to understand it, but it sure seems that way that whenever you do respond to questions on those applications, most of the time, it sure seems that way that providing more detail. Is that supposed to be for the better or for the worse? And like everybody else may say that the number of times that you tried, it seems like a lot of these companies want more detail, right? a lot more detail. Well, what is that supposed to mean right there? Okay, are you good at fixing problems? Meaning that the future issues will no longer exist. What does that mean? So it sure seems that way, that the more questions, and half the time you want to know too, that does that pretty much mean like the more questions a company has for you, then the more chances are that they're going to want to hire you at some point, right? So if that's supposed to be a good thing, and even though we might even say too that yeah, you get so sick and tired of hearing the same thing to where that you send an application today, but they might even say that wait 30 days before you send in another application. So let's just say that, and I know I'll even tell everybody here too, I get kind of tired of it too, but still, it's like, wait 30 days. Wait 30 days before you apply. Before you apply again, and like everybody else may say, that, that's a lot of gas, a lot of time. Why should you have to drive 20 miles there and then 20 miles back and find out that they might even tell you the same thing as toward it, yeah, well, we'll call, we'll notify you. Yeah, notifying. So I could just write it kind of like that right there. I'm like, how many of us would maybe get a response like that? And so it sure seems that way, that each time we think about jobs, though, that we think about jobs, are we necessarily thinking about, yeah, well, are we thinking about exercises? Are we thinking about, practice reasons? Or are we thinking about duties and occupation and response? I'm like, yeah, all the above. It seems like to me, though, that based on my experience, it's really, all the above. And then tell everybody too that it seems like it's not like it used to be. Whenever you do apply for a job, that you can just walk in and talk to a manager and all that. Even if you could nowadays, and it's like they're going to probably tell you the same thing, really. But one thing that I did want to talk about, for redoing something, and a few things I want to talk about from earlier were fixing problems means that the future issues will no longer exist. It's like a filter, right? And so one thing I did want to add right here of talking about with whenever it comes to fixing problems is to where that future problems may not be recorded. So how important is it to record the problems? And when we're talking about testing and making sure everything's okay, that sort of thing. But one thing that I did want to talk about too is to where that if you were actually hired to be a technician for to service a store or for a company, and let's just say that most of your agendas were right down here, to where that you had a couple of them that you developed some ideas and some interest about what's the best ways of how to fix them. And like anybody say that, especially if you're going to be an engineer, that you would probably run into that situation to where that you develop a filter, or maybe if it's anything about special tools and techniques that you were able to gain during over the weekend or something like that. And 102 is to where that you were working on this analysis for a reason, so that way you can give some advice to fixing any problems in the near future, right? And so that's why a lot of these technicians might even say that yeah, if you come to the situation to where that this work is no longer needed, I'm like, it no longer exists. Well, it's pretty much as a reset. Well, you don't have to worry about it now. And so how do we handle that to where that anybody who's going to be working on an assignment or a project might even say that there's optional steps and there's also requirements, right? But let's just say that how do we handle that to where if something does become optional? And I can maybe put on here that put like a little symbol right here to where that needed or something like that. And you can maybe put on there, you can maybe paste right here on the bottom. I'll just type that in right here, such as no problems. Yeah, no problems right here. no problems. And so I put on here, yeah, no problems. So I can just put something like that. Would it be, worded like that, saying no problems? Everything is working fine. Everything is working okay. And so, yeah, it would be kind of like that right there. So it sure seems that way that each time there's a problem, it's supposed to get your attention, right? And so it sure seems that way, like kind of like a warning sign, and tell everybody else here that if you want to go ahead and create a sticky note for that, and if you want to go ahead and maybe put on here that sticky notes, for warning signs, and maybe like use a yellow one for warning or something like that. Warning or caution. And like everybody else might even say that yeah, well, really that I can maybe start out with that warning and caution right here. I'm like, yeah, usually warnings are usually highlighted in red, right? And oh, we're gonna really copy. I don't know if I don't really need to copy that. In case of anybody that may say that, you can go ahead and copy that so that we can show everybody here how that works. But you just hold your finger right there and then just copy it. Click space right there and hold your finger right there. And so I can just use warning for right now, and then it'll be like a message on here. I mean, you may have to have it installed like a little plugin or something like that, but you put it on here is just toward it. You are about to, about to authorize this program to your files. So I can just use that for right now. So a lot of the files, like if you have it stored on the cloud or something like that, and a lot of those files that would be, I'm like, you were about to authorize this program to your files. You would have access to your files and all that. And then caution basically means to be aware. So a lot of times it sure seems that way that when we think about that, especially, and you want to know too that with all the scams and everything now, and you want to know too that do you think that maybe that you would see those signs a little bit more often, and especially if you're filling out the applications, even for unemployment and maybe even for health insurance, and even with your taxes, that maybe you're going to be you'll be a little bit more alert about what messages that could be coming up, especially during this COVID quarantine and so that's why it sure seems that way that every time you think about that though in 102 is to where that really if you did have to redo something, would that pretty much mean to where that you had to start out fresh, you had to start all over again, and me might say that no, you're not really starting all over again. What you really are doing is you're being trained on a brand new exercise. So I guess another way of how do you want to cause is toward it. It's a new exercise, brand new exercise, a brand new exercise. So it's like just brand new exercises. So in case if you get any messages like that, even by email, that you might get a message like that, for brand new exercise, and it's basically another way of how the company is trying to make sure that everything is all correct, and it's like an overview, just a little bit like a review. So you really are not having to do the same thing over and over again. So it sure seems that way that, how can you really detect over the fact about if you feel like you had to do everything over and over again, if you feel like maybe a lot of your information on your profile was erased, And anybody say that there's ways of how you can tell that, right? But on the other hand, too, that if you do believe that you put a little bit more time than what was asked for at the beginning, but like everybody else would say too, that whenever you do think about job applications, though, it's like you're always thinking as toward it that you cannot it's getting hard for you to remember how many of them that you filled out and then knowing about what company that you've been in touch with, and so that's why it sure seems that way. That do you have to keep like an agenda toward it? All these companies, and doing that maybe on a PowerPoint using maybe an Excel file to where you put in all these applications, and want to know how many companies that would be in touch with you about a job opportunity compared to the ones that don't have no openings, ones that do have openings, but then they're telling you that your application is under review, stuff like that. But on the other hand, that talk about for fixing problems, though. So it sure seems that way that if you were working maybe out of the entire week, and let's just say if it was out of the whole week that you came up with maybe 45, I can just put on here for 45. You came up with 45 topics, if you want to kind of call them topics, to where, okay, this is how you fix this problem right here. And, I have an idea for how to fix this problem. I have an idea for how to fix that problem. So it sure seems like, results, especially with results. And I'm not trying to squeeze everything in here all in one document, but I'm just telling everybody here that it's really important. I think it's really important to keep everything organized. Like if you're working on a Word document or Excel file or something like that, try to keep everything organized. But this right here is notes. It's just a notepad right here. So whenever you do take down notes, what you're basically are doing is you're breaking down these words, these characters right here into different topics, and just to kind of like forming like a little rough draft, kind of like. But you're just generating ideas, and you're just breaking them down, and so it's like forming examples, and so that's why it sure seems that way that people might say is to where it's kind of all mixed in, whenever doing that, but. On the other hand, that whenever you first start a conversation with somebody, it seems like that not everything is organized, and that's why it seems like that people are asking you to when do you know when you want to go ahead and organize everything, and maybe I might talk about for rendering and all that, but the way I think about it, though, is that when we're talking about fixing problems, right, and some of these problems. Can we really ask that question to where if most of these problems were meant to be, to where, okay, well, were they accidental or were they on purpose? And people may say as to where how many of us are really going, well, I think, I think I can, admit it, but, still, that how many of us will maybe say is toward it, whenever you go back and look at all these problems, though, and at 102 is to where that really, you're not really here, Mike, you're really to say that, well, which one of them do you think was really considered to be, your fault? Or, well, that's, that's the problem that you were supposed to fix earlier or something. But, so it sure seems that way that every time we possibly think about that, the possible needs to be redid, talk about for reset. And, so that's a probability that I was talking about from earlier, is that when we think about redoing something, does that pretty much mean that you had to start over? Well, not necessarily. It's like a recap, and when we talk about recap, that means is to where you're going back to the very beginning just to making sure that everything is all correct and everything is the same, and so a lot of the paperwork, a lot of the important documents too, would do that, and that's why it sure seems that way. That every time we think about that, though, and want to know is toward it, is it really meant to use more of your time, or is it really meant the fact about is to where that well, really that if everything, like whenever you do review something. What you're basically are doing is toward it that you're recalculating. Like, if everything looks correct, everything looks okay, and So a lot of times it seems like, everybody may want to know too that whenever you do fill out an application or whenever you're working on something, though, that you would maybe think is toward, really, does everybody have that legal right to where that they can go ahead and go back and look at their information before it goes into the mail, before you actually seal it, before you actually package it into that mail, into that piece of mail that you're using, and before you actually send it in by mail, that you're able to look at everything before it's sent, right? Before you submit it. And you want to know too is that really, it's another way of how do you want to call this is to where you're looking at what's on inside, but you don't really need to be doing that, especially if there's anything personal or confidential in that mail. So like anybody else would say too, that yeah, well, for sure, if anything's labeled confidential, but half the time you want to know too is that whenever you're going to be filling out any application or all that, but still that you want to know too that does redoing something pretty much mean starting over? Well, it don't always mean that. It just means as to where that whenever you do redo something that what you're it's a new exercise, and your brand new exercise to where that you're showing somebody what you were doing, and I can also look at that too to where it's a training exercise. If somebody's asking you, please show me how you arrived at that answer. Please show me, how you did that. And so it sure seems that way that, future issues will no longer exist. So it sure seems that way that, could you possibly answer that by saying to her, hey, all that work that you were doing, well, you don't have to worry about it, or yeah, it was dropped. It was actually dropped from earlier because they decided to were that they were not going to. It was more like for a backup purpose, in case if something went wrong, or in case of anything else. But not everything has been confirmed yet, and but it sure seems that way that. We cannot have it to where every 3 years or so, like maybe every year, that you're going to think that everything is all taken care of and that process was already taken care of, and find out that, your people are going to maybe be bothering you maybe within a year later and telling you that there's a problem with this. So it sure seems that way that every application to me is like a follow-up, and, just a follow-up about your application from earlier. So it's like, people might even say that, put that in big bulky letters or something, like, a follow-up. It's a follow-up, just making sure that everything looks okay, and from the last time you applied, you were denied. I'm like, yeah, the application, came back declined at the very beginning, but we'll go ahead and, try again, and try another year. So try a year, 1 year, and wait another year. So a lot of times it seems like a lot of these companies that even insurance companies would maybe even say that, wait a year before applying again. And so it sure seems that way that wait 1 year before you apply again, or maybe wait that 6 months before trying this process again, or wait 30 days before you try it again. So are we basically talking about is this to where the typical science, typical data science, and I could put on here for typical data science. Is that another way of how do you want to call it for data science? You're waiting for the systems to correspond. And a lot of times it seems like that's really the case. If there's any glitches or anything like that come up, and you want to know too, is to where that why does it take so long, just for something like that? And so it sure seems that way that every time we think about data science and every time we think about the application process, though, that you want to know too is that what are you supposed to do in the meantime? Well, it sure seems that way. It's all about homework, ain't it? What am I supposed to do in the meantime? Well, just for practice. Just for practice is to where that, take notes and do the homework, do the study, do the homework. And I can just put on here homework because everybody else might even say that really you have to be at home in order to be able to do that, don't you? Do the homework. You have to be at home, do you? I'm like, well, you probably have an office there at home, or anybody may even want to know too that really is a closet considered to be a place where you can work? A what? Yeah, a closet. Can you work in a closet? Well, if you got enough space, if we're talking about maybe a walk-in closet or something, I'm like, I would really recommend you to work in an actual room, related office. But like everybody else would even say too, that whenever if you're going to be at home, we don't recommend. You could even go into the backyard or the front yard or anywhere else around the house. But still, but really that everybody else might say is toward it. You want to know too is that if you're going to be doing your homework, working on some of this stuff right here, you want to know too that well, is the bathroom and maybe the laundry room included or anything else that you might think? But still that they'll probably say that really as long as it's a safe. I'm like where you had the ability to where I'm like where you can actually work, and then plus maybe like somewhere for safety first, right? And I put on here for safety first, and so it sure seems that way that safety first. So every time we think about that though is that knowing that whenever it comes to homework though, and whenever it comes to data science though, that if you're going to be working on something, and I say is to where well, if you're working from home especially, but at the time it's like 102 that okay, make a copy of something or anything like that. You're waiting in line, waiting for your name to be called, and so it's like fixing problems means that the future issues will no longer exist, and then more work to do, and so it sure seems that way. That all this work right here that you put into a job and a 102, that it's like well, really, how do you handle those situations to where if something was dropped or whenever a project was canceled? So let's just say if it was canceled for any reason at all, that if you were working on an assignment, and let's just say that if it was canceled, postponed or canceled, and like I say, is to where well, really, that you're on a waiting point, right? And it don't mean, it may not mean that you can forget about it, but still that what it pretty much means is to where you, there at the time that that it was. I'm like people may say it was paused, and so I guess that you can maybe say that toward it. It's paused. Yeah, paused. People may say that well, pause. You're on a breaking point. So a lot of times, I actually see this more, and I can tell everybody here, to be quite honest with you, I actually see this more on a tax document. I actually see this more on a tax document, but when it's on pause, that pretty much means is toward that you don't need to do anything now, but then wait 6 months to a year before you start working on it, and so it sure seems that way that canceled, or like everybody else, canceled pretty much means that you don't have to worry about it right now, right? But if we were to actually look that up in the dictionary though. Maybe break that down into 2 words or something like that. What does it usually mean whenever you say cancel with 2 L's, but then cancel with 1 L? And, we kind of call that in the dictionary to where that if it's labeled for 2 L's, and they might even say that, well, you'll have a second opportunity to get back to it at a later on point than compared to with 1 L, you only have one opportunity to do this, and something like that. But one of those is means equal. Yeah, equal. So like everybody else might say that, one of those should mean equal to where you're basically are, agreeing to where that you do your part of the work before that, before everything is considered even, right? I guess another equation I can also put on here, talk about for even. So a lot of team members would even say that even with the team. So let's just say that if you're going to be working as a team on something and want to know that there's going to be a number of agendas that need to be worked on and accomplished within certain timing, right? And I want to know too that, how often are you going to maybe see that to where that, whenever you first start working on the process, you've seen all these tasks and all these agendas that had to be done. And you want to know too that, you don't even know where to begin. But let's just say on average though, that if you can start by picking something that you're looking forward to the possibility. Like let's just say that if you're able to find the cure for this problem, then maybe companies are kind of anxious to know, what your results are. And so that's why it sure seems that way. That whenever we talk about fixing problems, and everybody else might even say that, you actually want to talk a little bit more about the tools, about the problem fixing, maybe to compare to everything else, because people may say that we don't have enough tools to fix the problems, number one. So we're trying to find the tools to fix the problems. In order to be able to fix the problems, though, it's like, yeah, you pretty much have to talk about them and doing the research, whichever. But on the other hand, it sure seems that way that fixing problems mean that your future issues will no longer exist. So let's just say that if anybody were to think that way, to where that if you're going to be working on any source of problem, any source of task, that anything that you were going to maybe work on at a later on point, let's just say if you're going to get back to it maybe within 2 years from now, and they might say, well, you don't have to worry about it, since there's no problems reported on a database. So a lot of everybody else might even say that whenever you first start working a job, you were originally hired to fix those problems, right? But let's just say if you were to reduce those problems at a later on point, that would mean that no work is needed, right? So let's just say that whenever you first apply for a job, you might say that, yeah, well, you mainly look at what's required and compared to maybe what's recommended and maybe what's optional. So a lot of times you may think that, hey, that seems to be just a little bit. I'm like anybody say that, that seems to be more time, a little bit wasted time, doesn't it? And that's why it seems like maybe a lot of everybody else is just all mad all the time. Whenever you go through an application and you're wondering that, hey, that, why is it that whenever you're working on something, if this information is not needed later on, then why am I spending more time on it? And so that's why it sure seems that way, that you want to kind of think about that is to where it's all about testing your knowledge, and it's all about testing and just to kind of get yourself familiar with this exercise. So it sure seems that way that companies might tell you that, that these exercises are supposed to train you and or test your knowledge and not of your physical. I'm like, yeah, so far as your to basically health, your mentally and physically as well. So it's like so the ways we think about that though is that a training exercise, I guess, could that also mean is toward it, companies are going to test you by saying is toward it, this is the right or wrong way of how to do something and how to work this task, right? It's basically, training exercises. Training exercises are basically another way of how to get your mind working stronger. It's all about trying to get your working and your health and your wellness and everything. It's all about trying to get your mind working stronger. It's all about it's trying to help improve your knowledge, all right, and trying to help you improve your knowledge. But at the same time, it sure seems that way that you want to know too, what does it have anything to do with what I'm studying on? But at the same time, it's like, yeah, problems though that if you were to be spending a lot of time, maybe even in the lab, or maybe working in a garage, or anywhere else that you're going to be working, and you find a solution, you find a lot of solutions to a problem that you want to know too, that this was not here from before. And so it sure seems that way. There's a lot of jobs that will hire you if you're able to find a lot more than maybe that what was of the uncertainty from before. So let's just say that whenever you first start working a problem, whenever you first start working a task, that you actually find a lot of problems. And so it sure seems that way that, yeah, that's one of the reasons why a lot of companies would even say too, that a lot of things that we found about your resume that make it more interesting and appeals to us about toward it. That's one of the reasons why we want to hire you, because that there's work based on your resume that is needed. And that's why it sure seems that way, that every time we think about that though, that 45 you found 45 and talk about for brand new exercises and review. Give it a week of 45 objectives and then talk about for no problems. And so talk about for fixing problems mean that future issues will no longer exist. But on the other hand, it's like really that especially if we're talking about jobs that require a lot of fixing and maybe a lot of issues that need to be addressed, right? And you learn toward it that whenever you first got hired for the job, that was it for full time or was it for part time? And you look back maybe 2 years ago that all the work in process that was worked and all that. But really that when we think about a job, a lot of times, do we think about that to where that maybe not all your work is going to be needed. You may not use all your knowledge. You may not use everything that's present, right? You may not use everything. But let's just say that, if you had a job to where you were able to use some of those skills, just to work. And people might say a lot of companies, how many companies would be much appreciated if you did that? And so I say that, yeah, anything that you would like to tell our clients. And so it sure seems that way that, back nearly 3 years ago, that a lot of this information was needed during the time, but then now it's like a lot of those problems have been fixed, and so that's why it sure seems that way that having everything recorded like on a form or a transcript does that really help out a lot toward it. You're able to generate a lot of the problems that occurred during the time, and that kind of explains and gets you the idea about what was going on during the time. So that's why it sure seems that way whenever you work on an application, anything that you're going to be working on, that it seems like time goes by slower, right? Whenever you're waiting, but you want to know too that time seems to go by much faster. Time goes much faster when you stay busy. So even if you're in the middle of answering questions or talking to a customer or to a client, it seems like that's usually the case, right? Whenever you're in the middle of a conversation and then it's like, as soon as that door opens to go in to the next room, and then that's whenever, it's like, so anybody say that, if you do begin a conversation with somebody, and it seems like that, the reason why you're chatting with somebody is because you're just trying to get something off your mind, and a lot of times people say, drama, and do any scientists and doctors may consider that normal? We're talking about for drama, is to where you feel comfortable. You feel comfortable talking to somebody, like a counselor. until the the work is accomplished. Or I'll just say until the work is processed, right? So it sure seems that way, that every time we think about work in the process, though, and I can also put on like, I don't know, if you want to maybe put like a curly bracket or something like that right there, a quote or something like that to talk about for drama. So how many of us, therapists and doctors would even say too, that do you feel better talking to somebody about your problems and discuss them, while you're waiting, while you're waiting, while you're working on something, does it really ease your mind just a little bit, just to talk to somebody like such as a counselor or a therapist about something, and just to kind of get your mind off all the stress and anxiety and everything that's going on, and that's why it sure seems that way, that each time you think about that, and I want to know too that they are considered to be your best friend. Once you do, once you're able to, to get everything all fixed, and I'm like, yeah, your best friend. They're considered to be your best friend. Once the problems are fixed, right? They're considered to be your best friend. Once the problems are fixed, and you want to know too that like everybody else might even say that whenever you're going to be working on something, just like a counselor and just like a therapist, that how do you explain to your insurance companies about how to solve those situations to where that if whenever you come close to a bond with somebody and they fix your problems, and it basically means is toward it that they did their job, and if you've already been able to fix the problems that occurred from earlier, then people may say is toward you've done your job, and so it's like I guess that's the hardest part a lot of times with a lot of jobs out there. That's like the hardest part, but whenever you bond with somebody, and whenever you're able to fix a lot of your problems, and so it's like so it sure seems that way. That talk about for if it's a counseling, and maybe if it is in regards to doing your homework or anything else, that whenever you first start working on something, that you're wondering toward it, it seems like it was a lot harder than what you thought it was, and so it's like every time you think about that, though, that the things that you thought that were much easier than what you thought that they were, and that's why it seems like that anything that you want to use for reference, and anything that you want to use for for your for documents or anything. But I just really think too that based on from my knowledge and experience, though, that it seems like that you were able to gather up a lot more information recorded than from what was from before. So it's like every time you think about that it's like really that how do we explain that whenever something becomes to be more challenging than what you thought it was? Now, like I say, it's supposed to be known as a relief, and so basically, I can also put right here, talk about for relief, and so it's another way. I'm like, it's a cure for recovery. It's supposed to be a cure for recovery. So it's like, whenever really, so just to recover. So it's basically meaning toward it. Does that pretty much mean that a lot of your hard work, that does pay off at some point, and so you're just trying to figure out what that a lot of hard work is, and for anything, if you found anything useful out of everything. So it's like, to me though, it's just like having a kit. Whenever you have a toolkit around, that you may not use everything in that toolkit, but at the same time that you might find about maybe one or two things that you can use, from that kit. And people may say that most of the time, if it's not going to be the tape, or maybe if it's not going to be a wrench or maybe a screwdriver or something like that, it's maybe going to be something like maybe not even a pair of pliers or something, but But let's just say that on average, though, that most of the time the toolkits that I have used over years have mainly been in regards to maybe something like like a flashlight or something. Most of the time it's a flashlight. I could be honest with everybody here too. If you were to go into your toolkit now and look for anything in your toolkit, you know for sure, more likely it's going to be a flashlight. I can tell everybody here too that most of the time it's a flashlight. Everybody else, carpenters, flashlights. Flashlights, or maybe tire compressor or something like that. Usually it's flashlights. I would say flashlights are the most common tool that are used whenever it comes to tools. If you're trying to open the toolkit or first aid kit or something like that. But let's just say if you're going to be opening up a toolkit most of the time, any accessories that you do find in a toolkit that you would say that most of the time it's to locate a flashlight. So it's like anything battery charger or a flashlight. So it's like you want to know too that if you're going to have a toolkit around, but still. But the way I think about it too, though, that sure not sure sure, no problem. And so you have a lot of these notes right here that I wrote down, but still that talk about for fixing problems means that the future issues will no longer exist, and you talk about for filters. So it's like so if you're going to be starting a conversation with anybody really, and let's just say that if the reason why you were putting all this together right here was so that way you can talk about the problems and think of the best suggestions and then maybe the solution of the problems, and you want to know too, you may not use everything. But just to kind of keep in mind really about is to where that is it really best to go in and just to kind of get just to kind of get a clue and an idea about what could possibly happen if in case of this happen or in case of that happens. So it's basically different risks happen, but really though, that when we think about jobs though, that are we supposed to be? Is that really what a job is supposed to be about? Is to where you're supposed to hang on to this data. You're not supposed to just after 30 days or whatever, but still that that's one thing that we can think about when we do apply for a job. That any of your research that if you think that it could be useful later on, then why don't you hold on to this stuff? Why don't you hold on to it like a tool? If we're supposed to think about that, to where the tools, tools can last for years, but let's just say that maybe if it's 5 years later, and maybe let's just say the similar problem came up maybe 5 years from now, and you want to go ahead and say that do you have a tool for that? And so, like a lot of technicians would even say too that similar problems from the past that really would give you what you call that gift of kindness, right? So everybody else might say that we're waiting for a perfect gift, and that gift of kindness. So it seems like most of the time it's from an insurance company. Maybe mainly from your insurance company, and memberships or insurance companies must have, but memberships and insurance. So a lot of times it sure seems that way that every time we think about that though in 102 that a lot of those gifts, and like I say really that. If anybody were to be going to college to do his studies and you may be going through the specific training for a job, and let's just say people may want to know too that how do you explain about the fact if you don't use everything? So if you don't use everything, how do you explain about if you don't use everything? Do not use everything. We did not use everything. So what's a good explanation for that? Well, I say is toward keep in mind. Okay, keep in mind to where that to remember that that task, that something to be to remember, based on your experience. So that's usually what I say, but still, in case of anybody that may want to know too, that you may not use everything, but still, that whenever you think about a job, though, that it sure seems that way. That would anybody much rather hear something rather than nothing? But it sure seems that way. That every time we do think about a job, that it's like you think about to where that problems that come up, and if you had to redo something, but on your hand, it's like you always want to know too that talk about having the knowledge of working in an office and all that. So every time you think about that, it sure seems that way. That everything seems to be a lot harder than what you thought it was, and that's why just to be able to overcome a lot of those challenges, though. And you may want to know too is that yeah, did you do great at the very beginning? That you learned a lot. Like everybody else would say too. That you learned a lot while you were working, while you were being trained on a lot of this work, right? And so that's why everybody else might even say that whenever it comes to understanding about fixing problems, though, and what does that mean right there, or the future issues will no longer exist, but if anything, they won't be as bad. But so let's just say that on average, though, that whenever you were working on a job, and 102, that a lot of companies, what exactly is it that a lot of companies are looking for? And knowledge and experience, and knowing about how much that you're willing to overcome those challenges. And but it sure seems that way that whenever we think about a resume, though, like companies might say that yeah, well, we came across your resume and thought that you would be a good fit, and that's why it's like, yeah, well, really, whenever you redo something, that don't always mean that you're starting over. That means is that like, yeah, it's like an overview, and so that's why it's like say that possibly needs to redo, and just to make sure that everything looks okay. And so that's the way I think about it too, though. That when we think about that, like talk about like, yeah, scams and everything going on, but fixing problems means that future issues will no longer exist, and not recorded, and then time goes by much faster when you stay busy with something. And so it's like, yeah, so a lot of that stuff talked about, and comes to a job application, but on the other hand, that if we would actually put that into a math problem right there, it means is that you are in it need to spend more time reviewing that data, and spending more time reviewing, repeating the same process over and over again. Confirm the process that matches the application. 5,000 applications in 5 days. So it sure seems that way that, about how many candidates can we really hire at a time? And say that, maybe right now we're on a higher demand, so we're in needing to hire we're on a higher demand toward it 25 candidates. So I'll put on here we're on a higher need to hire up to 25 more candidates. And so let's just say that 25, we're on need at where we need more people. So I know a lot of these companies might even say that even though if you sent the application in, it might be maybe 5 weeks before they're able to recover your application, just to go over your application. So a lot of these companies might even say that it might be even a year before you get a response about that. And so that's why it seems like that the main purpose to your 102 is that that's maybe one of the reasons why a lot of everybody else would be mad about it a lot of times, is that whenever you do work hard on something, and 102, sometimes it's maybe 5 days before you get a response about something. So that's why it sure seems that way. That you enter your name into a drawing, and then you're on a waiting point before your application is called. And so that's why, just a little bit to where that, why is it that you might think as to where really there's really nothing fun about it. And tell everybody else too that every time you think about application, everybody else might say that every time you think about application, you feel like saying this toward it. It sounds a lot like surgery, but still that's not really the case. But everybody else might even say that it's beginning to the point to where that you're getting tired of hearing about that, about application this, application that. Well, how many of us are really going to look forward to training? How many of us are really going to be looking forward to field trip? You want to know too that when am I going to hear the word field trip? I look forward to the field trip. I wanna go on a field trip. I look forward to the field trip. Yeah, the field trip. The field trips are more exciting than compared to the application. Okay, so you would rather go on a field trip, huh? I'm like, that's right. I would rather go on a field trip. You can actually go somewhere and you can actually learn something. But being I say that really that would you. But a lot of times it's like, well, really, you would think that an application would be the same thing. Like, well, not really, but still. But that's something I'm just thinking about too. That how many of us would much rather go on a field trip than then to fill out another job application. But like everybody else would say that if I could maybe pull up the Google map too. But like everybody else would maybe say that you really would need to know where you're going whenever you're going on this field trip. But still that a lot of us would even say that whenever you're filling out an application, a lot of times that if you have to go to this office just for the interview, and OneNote too is like the directions to the directions on the map. Yeah, directions on the map. I can go ahead and put that map, the map view. It would really be best if I could pull up the map, but still. Anyway, the directions, and so it sure seems that way that every time we think about every time we think about field trip, though, Michael, but every time we think about applications, especially, but redoing something means that you are in need to spend more time reviewing that data. But then I can also put on here, comma, and something like, making sure it matches. So a lot of applications would say too that making sure that everything is all correct based on your profile. And I know people say that profiles are important. Profiles are important, everybody. Believe it or not, it may seem like profiles are really optional, but due to the hiring status nowadays, it seems like that those are what's called the most important. Just because of the fact that profiles don't just show a picture and maybe about the school that you went to, but what we can also think about that is toward it. Yeah, and I tell everybody too that you have to sign in. You have to log in each and every time, whichever. But the way we think about that though is that based on the training exercise here, that it sure seems that way. That every time you think about that though. And what I know too is that companies are more likely to be going over the applications, maybe that the better that they know you, and so it sure seems that way. That every time we think about jobs, though, it's like just to kind of get to better know your skills a little bit more, we're going to go ahead and give you a training exercise, and so it's like some companies don't even call it training. A lot of them are just going to call it scenarios or agendas or something like that. But anyway, but the basic thought. But anyway, thanks. And I know that's a lot of information right there. But on your hand too, I thought that was a fun to talk about that. But anyway, confirm making sure everything's okay. But really, that the way I think about it too, that the way that the pieces of the puzzle that come together, especially. But I just really think too that really that should we think that it's important to recognize the work at the beginning in 102 is toward it. I can also put on here too that the tough get going. Yeah, the tough get going. What does that mean? Whenever the tough gets going, is toward it's a lot harder, but it gets much I don't know about easier, but let's just say that that you learned a lot. I'll just leave it at that. You learned learned you learned a lot from the very beginning. You learned a lot from the very beginning. So I'll just put that right there. The tough get going, and so say the tough. So far as the dictionary, though, but still that. But the way I think about it, there are things that talk about. But anyway, some advice. But if you were to actually put that into a word problem, you want to know too that what source of scenario do you think that you'll be able to come up with if you did put that into like any source of word problem? And 102 that if it's square inches or if you have to add or subtract or anything like that. But anyway, thanks for watching everyone, and have a great day.